right. So I guess Matthew will be joining us in a minute, but we can start with a word of introduction. So it's Stephen Wood, head of scientific computing at Sheffield Teaching Hospitals, and a guy we've worked with in several collaborative research projects over the years, even before the establishment of Sano. And he's the person who's actually in charge of deployment and maintenance of IT systems at STH, which is a large hospital. I guess you can perhaps tell us a bit more about how big it is, but yeah, it's comparable in size, if not greater, larger than our university hospital. And you know, so he's sort of in a similar situation to us here, in that he's sort of between the medical community and the research and development teams that are actually implementing and deploying systems. So Woody has extensive experience when it comes to actually deploying and utilizing actionable IT solutions in a clinical setting and dealing with all the problems that come with that, whether legal, organizational, societal, scientific, and anything else you might imagine. So he's a person that's always worth listening to, which is why
I'm not going to cover all that in this presentation, I'm afraid.
Okay, we can have a discussion afterwards, but yeah. So this is only meant as an introduction. We are going to have several more in-depth session with specific research teams tomorrow morning. They're not going to be very long, but then we can discuss more specific issues and potential collaboration opportunities. So I'm grateful to all of you who have agreed to take part. We'll deal with that tomorrow. This looks good as far as I'm concerned. Okay, yeah, that's the rest of the team. So I've already sort of given a short introduction, so I suppose we can begin.
Okay.
You can close it, or at least see my close so we don't. I mean, yeah, you can just leave it just a slightly ajar, so that if somebody else wants to join, they won't be problem for that. But yeah, that's good. Yeah, right, over to you.
Okay, thank you. I should start by saying that the scope for this presentation was vague, to say the least. Tell us what you do. So I had to narrow it down a bit to this. We are a big hospital. I think by number of beds we're the 12th biggest in the UK, but by counts like subspecialties in the hospital, we're about 5th. We're a massive centre for a lot of things. So radiotherapy treatments, and some very, very specialised treatments. They all come to us from for a large region around us. In fact, sometimes national. So we're very complicated, and that comes with its own challenges. I don't know a lot about the kind of IT infrastructure that you guys would be faced with if you went into hospitals here. Predominantly in the UK, every hospital is a Microsoft shop. They're all running Windows on every desktop, and it's usually managed for the most part centrally at the OS level and big applications. You know, people do have smaller applications installed, but that comes with its own challenges in IT to get people doing it. So one of our big challenges is being able to take lots of the research that we do in an environment like this. So we are collaborators active doing research on projects EU largely, which is how we know Dr. and the other guys here. And take that and put it to use in a hospital. Now it's never as simple as taking the whole platform, whatever it was that you were going to change the world with, rarely survives the hard, cold light of the hospital environment. But there are chunks of it, certainly, that we use and put to work in the hospital. And that's where we come in. We knock it into shape to some degree. We prepare it for enterprise, which, of course, it's not your job to do that. But if you don't understand where you're heading, you can make some decisions in your application design that will make it really challenging for you to move forward to the next level of that translation and adoption.
can come over.
Okay, thank you. So I'm going to start off with talk a little bit about our team, how we work. That's my email. Sorry if I mute it. I don't think I'll get anything through these speakers for questions, so I'm going to have to leave a thing in there. A bit about our development infrastructure, what we use inside the hospital to do our jobs. This will all seem fairly familiar to you, I assume. Then I'll talk about healthcare enterprise, really what a hospital, certainly in our country, is going to demand of you and your application to be able to put it to work live in a clinic. A bit about how we approach general users in the hospitals. We're talking mostly clinical people, although we do a lot of admin work as well. The hospital isn't just treating patients. In fact, a massive chunk of the hospital is not just treating patients. It's admin, it's clinical coding, it's logistics, it's distribution of medications towards where they need to be. So we manage the vaccination program, for instance, which distributes all the drugs and records who's been vaccinated. That's not particularly a clinical application, it's just an admin one, but it's quite important. And then a little bit about our current research, what we're doing now in the hospital that people in the hospital don't know we're doing, but will need, and what our plans are for pushing that out. So Sheffield team, we're 8 to 10 people, depending on the number of RAs or researchers we have in the team. Currently, we're quite low on researchers because of Brexit and that whole nightmare. Hopefully, we'll build that back up as we move on. But we only have one person who's actively working on a specifically funded research project right now. We do everything. We always have for 20 years since the team got set up. We always decided that if it wasn't your job to fix the problems you created, you were going to do a crappy job. That's kind of since become known as DevOps, which is fine. But even still, we do the step before that as well. We do the business requirements. We found that you can't have someone who doesn't know what's possible in a solution in a meeting with users who don't know what they want, because it just doesn't work. You get this kind of nightmare grey area where people have to come back to the office and say, can we do this? And then a week later go back to me and say, yeah, we can probably do that. It was just ridiculous as a process. So we have to absorb this business analyst function as well, which means we need some moderately unusual people. We've had some people who were more towards the computer science end of the spectrum who really didn't get that part of the role, and as such, we struggled to use them particularly effectively. You have to want to solve the problem, and sometimes solving the problem isn't writing a piece of software. Sometimes the solution to the problem is go and do your job properly. I'm not writing a database to help you manage a mess that you shouldn't have created in the first place. You have to be able to say that, and you have to understand that that's the case, not just take a list of requirements from someone and start bashing out some code. And that's one of the benefits of us being in the hospital, of course. We're not external to produce. I have no idea how I can mute that.
Maybe an email program, some sort of some communicator.
Yes, no, I know what it is.
Apparently, they were streaming the feed from your camera, which at least shows your rear end.
Block the camera.
Maybe you can unblock the camera or
I can block.
I
can block the camera.
No.
That should have gone.
Hopefully.
Fine. Anyway, so that's the structure of our team. These are our roles. We found this to be the most productive way to work. And we don't have big dev teams because they're hard to manage. So although we've got 8 people, for any product, even our big ones, which are quite big, we never have more than 3. It takes as long as it takes. People hate that. You'll never meet a manager who likes the answer, I don't know how long it's going to take and I don't know how much it's going to cost. But they have to live with it if they want to work with us. And fortunately, we've been doing this for quite a while, but they've come to trust the process and know that they'll get what they want out of the end of it. So they're willing to go down that kind of really genuinely agile route, as opposed to what agile is from now, which is some kind of management catastrophe. We have lots of products, like proper products that we run in the hospital. AllSafe is a trusted research environment where people have web logins to web-based RDP sessions into virtual workstations that we set up to be able to analyze patient data, and nothing leaves it, nothing comes in. It's all kind of quite tightly boxed up, but it lets them do some. So we use this for commercial collaborations in particular, where the companies, despite what you'll hear a lot of the time, unless they're doing AI, of course, they don't want the data. It's a massive headache for them. Having a safe place that they can do their statistics and health economics type work is good. We've got a database management system to build clinical applications quickly. This is probably our biggest product right now. This is a workflow system that manages patient journeys through outpatient departments. Every single patient, million a year, comes to the hospital for outpatients. They come in, they have height and weight, they might have imaging, they see a nurse, they see a consultant. We mapped out every single one of those processes. Every single person in the department has a work list that tells them who they should be seeing next, how long they've been waiting, and we don't lose people in the system like we did before. Complaints have gone down massively. We've got analytics on every single step of how long it takes everybody to do their jobs now. Every single click is recorded, and it's really, really good, not just for the business, but for the patients as well. We've got some research management stuff, managing all the governance for all the research projects. And then Find, which is our data warehouse, which I'll come on to discuss a little bit about the end. But these are fairly big things. So 2 or 3 of them, at least, are 2,000, 3,000 active users installed on 10,000 machines that we have to manage. When we get faced with something, these are the questions we ask. Can you buy it? Then just do it. I know it seems expensive, but it's almost certainly going to be cheaper than what it'll cost us. Certainly do this last one to build it. We use a lot of open source stuff wherever we can. It's awesome. It's a bit deficient in some places. Usually security doesn't match up, which is what I'll come on to later, as how we handle things like authentication in a large enterprise and how we augment the open source solutions, usually in that area, so we can use them effectively for the trust. Can we hack something we've already got or an open source solution to coerce it into doing what we need? And then the last step is actually physically building something. And I would advise anyone to go through that process.
Before we go to the next slide, can you go back to the previous slide? I want to make sure that you're basically being metaphoric here about the word stealing a solution, because some people are not native English speakers, so they don't get the humor.
Sorry.
I just want to make sure that you are saying this in the most harmless way.
I'm saying we use open source software solutions wherever possible.
Just want to make sure.
Yes. Yeah, we said steal it because those guys do some incredible things. They give it away, of course. And one of the worst things that we do is we tend not to give things back, which is really awful. I mean, most people don't want the changes that we've made back, but we have done a few things, and I have always felt really quite guilty that I haven't contributed changes back. We're trying to look at ways that we can do that, but the truth is it's actually quite time-consuming, and we don't often have it to push back. So that's one of the biggest things I feel bad about in all of our work. We take stuff and we rarely give back to the community. I hope we can find some time to do that with some of the things we've done. In terms of our general strategy, and it's the same for most businesses, in fact. There are only certain classes of problem, and I'm leaving communications out of here, so we're not talking about Teams and Skype and voice over IP and the comms that we have now, because those are entirely different technology. Everyone's problem in the hospital usually comes down to one of these 4 problems, really, or a combination of the 4. And so we decided we were going to build pillars, core infrastructure to deal with those things, and then layer on 100 different applications on the top. Everyone has something that's totally special to them, usually, because they want to be fast. They don't want 50 buttons and have to click 3. They just want the 3 they need. And it's really easy for us to build that for them because they all sit on top of these 3 or 4 solutions that we have. And I'll talk a little bit about what we do with each one of them. Well, document management, we use Alfresco, which is a massive open source document management system. It works fine. It's got great APIs. It's a tiny bit slow sometimes, but it's got a lot in it now. So we just need some bigger servers. We've got a workflow engine that manages processes. We've got data collection and reporting and analytics. We use a number of things. Kibana's a popular one that we use now because that's actually great. So this is what we invested in as a team. and then we went out and found problems to solve. We do agile software development without all that standing up stuff. That was annoying. But for the most part, we have sprints of a couple of weeks. We use Visual Studio mostly because we're a Microsoft shop, but we use Visual Studio Code. For our web stuff, we've chosen Svelte. That seems to have been an okay decision because we made that about 2 years ago and it's still improving and its take-up's increasing. That's our biggest horror, is investing in something and have it go stale or unsupported in 2 years, because our applications have to last for 10 years. That's a lifetime for a healthcare application, really. You put it in, no one wants to change it. It's too hard. They just want to sit there for a long time and work. We use GitLab, which probably most of you have heard of, for all our source code measurement and CI pipelines and things like that. And then we use Nagios for monitoring. This is kind of another thing that's quite interesting because there are better things than Nagios to monitor systems. Almost all of them require you to install an agent on every single platform that you have in your server room. We are never going to do that. Our IT department is never going to let us do that. So we've kind of compromised here. This is a totally passive, this just pings things out in the world. But it works as effectively as you need it to work. And sometimes you have to make, compromise your technical decisions and the purity of the solution that you would ideally like, because it just won't be acceptable. You'll never get it past someone who needs it. And for GitLab, we host it on premises, largely because the deployment pipelines and the continuous integration pipelines need to have access to our servers, and because we're a hospital, we've got firewalls, and again, no way anybody was going to let us open up access into the hospital from some publicly hosted cloud service so that anyone can push anything through it. So that's a decent bit of infrastructure that we run. It takes time to maintain it. So we use all the CD pipelines, we use the CI pipelines, and this helps us with our QA processes. So we haven't actually got it certified yet, but we're going for ISO accreditation on software development so that we can tick some boxes. We kind of don't need to do that because we're internal. There's no requirement for us to do it, but we're going to do it anyway because it helps us with credibility. And the other thing we've done is a kind of centralized, I kind of use the word app store to normal people. It's not really a store. It's just a central repository of all the latest code bases. And every application we produce checks in with that on run and downloads latest versions to all of the clients as soon as they start up. And this allows us to avoid a load of headaches in dealing with our IT department to get out new versions of software, especially if you're like doing releases every 2 weeks. I can't go to the IT department and say, here's a new MSI, can you push it out to 14,000? Just go mad with me. So a bit about hospitals. It's hard running an enterprise. We have 14,000 machines, I think, is the latest number we have, climbing all the time because now we have people with a laptop each as well, which is insane, but that's what they've started doing. Even tiny problems become a massive drain on your time when you're operating at that kind of scale. So their solution to this, and the general solution in any business, is to keep variation to a minimum. They do not like your little program on 5 machines in the department. They don't want it. It's a pain for them. They accept, or certainly our department accepts that sometimes that's necessary. There are things, commercial solutions that we have that are just installed on 10 workstations in radiology because they do some extraordinary and specialized thing. So they have to deal with it, but they don't like it. So already when you turn up at their door with something, they kind of don't want your problems. So you kind of have to approach it with that mindset. And you have to make sure that you've done a decent job of it. This is true. If you walked into our hospital and said, even a commercial one that's written in Java, instantly they would be looking for a reason to tell you to go away because it's a nightmare to manage. It was hard enough before. It doesn't tie itself to a particular version of the runtime natively. It doesn't force it. Things get overwritten. Whatever Java is on the path first will get executed. Just purely from a clinical safety perspective, that's a disaster. And since it forked into 12 different versions, I'm on now, it's just horrible. And there are ways to deal with it. Don't get me wrong. You know, you can distribute your application, the whole JVM built in. You can do your job properly, but most people we find don't. And so now the instant reaction from our IT department is we don't want anything that's written in Java because we know it's going to give us problems, or their experience is going to give us problems. You know, 20 years ago we had the same with VB. You know, when Microsoft released Visual Basic, it was this transformative thing that lowered the bar to people creating all kinds of applications because it was super simple. What in actual fact it did, from our perspective, was like giving a child a gun. You know, people came to us with incredibly sophisticated looking things that were just broken inside. They weren't developable because it took no skill to learn how to build it. And so for 10 years, people would say, oh, I don't think we should buy that, it's written in VB. It didn't matter what it did, didn't matter how good it was, we didn't even get to testing it. That was the reaction. So kind of need to understand that these things exist in commercial IT departments. Python's a bit better, but even still that's tricky when we get to Python applications. People don't do all the things that they're supposed to do with it. So you have to be aware of that. Packaging. All of our applications go out through a centralized packaging system. You give it to the IT department, they push it out to every machine. So if it's not got an MSI, their job's harder. You know, you have to learn how to deal with whatever infrastructure they have in order to get your thing onto the desktop. So we still go through the packaging team. We've got 100 applications, but we only do it once. So version 1, you give them an MSI. After that, it updates itself from our central repository. IT never hear from us again, and they kind of like that. So the initial install has to be done by them because it's a managed process. You need to get it onto all the machines. But you need to understand what you're faced with. What is their job? I mean, yeah, don't bother them with updates, especially not frequent ones. And we've spent a long time getting a set of services that would allow us to do this. But now we've got it, it just works. People use it in every application we produce, and it's great. This is the biggest problem we still have is single applications that have their own authentication databases. Users have different usernames, potentially, certainly different passwords and systems. Most organizations, I think, will have some kind of central authentication service. I don't know what it's like here. Ours is Microsoft Active Directory. It kind of doesn't matter what it is. The Windows logon, at least, is usually managed. So we always integrate with that as a process. This is called single sign-on. So all of our applications do that. The amount of time we spend on systems that don't have single sign-on or don't connect to our central authentication system is absolutely massive. So we decided, again, this is all about building a core set of capabilities that you can build on top of for anything that you get asked to do. We've decided to use Java JSON Web Tokens. This was an idea that we got from you guys, actually you guys, not sitting in the room, most of you, but when working on projects with, on your Valve project, our partners in CypherNet decided they were going to use this. We saw it, we thought this is actually really good. So now what we do is we link to the Microsoft Active Directory token, but then we transform all of their roles, all of their group membership, all of everything about them, we put in a JWT now. And then we use that to access everything. So we get the benefits of the standard management processes, but then we control everything after that in terms of the technology. And this is obviously platform agnostic, whereas Microsoft's not. We can't use iPads with Microsoft really, or Linux services, Docker, which we're starting to move to now, all of it useless against Active Directory. But since we kind of just move away from that as soon as we can to JSON Web Tokens, it's a standard approach to all of our security and group management. Yeah, wherever we can, we use the currently logged in user. That's usually what we want. Sometimes people say, well, that's not what I want, and then we give them a little button to say, not you, log in to someone else. Or sometimes we say, you always have to log in because it's a communal machine, and we know people log in at 8 o'clock in the morning and walk away. So in the emergency department, they do that. Typically, one person will log on. Against every policy we have around data security and IG, we know they do that. So when we know we're running in a place like that, we always make them authenticate again. But it doesn't matter. It's super easy to choose. yeah, and now we have a consistent approach that we use for all of our security, and it's super cheap, and people don't even understand it anymore. You know, we've got some guys who really don't understand the cryptography of JSON Web Tokens. They don't need to. We just give them a library and they check whether the role is admin or not, and then they do whatever they do in their applications. Actually, one other super clever thing, I thought, at least, because JSON Web Tokens is a kind of natively web technology, we can now start to use things like Nginx, sit that in front of open source products that don't have the security that we want. So we have a security proxy service. So if we've got something like Kibana, which doesn't handle security very well in terms of how you manage your users inside of it, but we still want to use it. So now we've got like 50 dashboards, each one for an individual department, but we've just got Nginx in front of it, and it just says if you're trying to get to this thing, you have to have this role in your JWT. If not, you get turned away. And we control access through that. So our Kibana thing's only got two accounts on it. One's a user account, one's an admin account. But we can do things like that now. We can start to protect other people's things that let us leverage all that awesome work without us having to dig into their source code. We can just put a ring around it and use JSON Web Tokens, and Nginx works really, really well for that. Yeah, so I already talked about that. You need to integrate with existing infrastructure to reduce data entry and clinical risk. No one wants to be typing stuff in twice. They just won't do it, in fact, usually. And if they do it, they'll do it fairly badly. So you need to be thinking about things like that in your applications. And you need to think about the core infrastructure in a hospital. I don't know how many of you ever look at this. There are mechanisms in hospitals for doing all sorts of stuff. You know, if you're going to create an application that analyzes images, probably you're going to have a database. Probably you're going to keep the patient ID in that database because someone's going to need to find that patient case again. What do you do when that patient's ID changes? You think they don't. People assume they don't. They do change. When their name changes because they get married, when they move address. You know, there are mechanisms in hospital dealing with all of this stuff. HL7 is the primary one for core demographics about patients. If you understand this, you can start to make your users' lives much more easy. And also, if you understand it and you can deal with it, it kind of increases your credibility with the people in the IT departments and the informatics side that you're dealing with. So we do everything we can through these. Lab results come through these. You need some blood values. You need some imaging reports from the RIS system or the PAC system. Those all come out through these feeds if you know where they are and you can get someone to send them to you. It's a bit funky. It's not very nice to deal with. Most systems still use 2.4, which is God knows how old. They moved on to 3, but it's too hard, so most people don't use that. This is a HL7 message. It is open a socket on a port and squirt some text down it. This is how the majority of a hospital's core infrastructure will exchange information. It's kind of terrifying, but I guess no more terrifying than HTML, which is ghastly, but it's so simple that anyone can use it in a sense, and that's why it's become the default standard for things. It's not that it's the best, it just works. So you're not supposed to understand this. This is a lab result, but embedded in here is the patient ID segment, so every woman, name, hospital number, other bits about this patient. This is the request for some lab test glucose. This is the doctor's name, some other bits and pieces. This is the results at the end. So this is the kind of name for the test. We had a value of 182 milligrams per deciliter. 70 to 105 is the normal, so this looks pretty shocking, but not my place to say. But this is it. This is an example of a HL7 message. It's not mystical. There's nothing clever about it. In fact, it's the dumbest thing in the world. As long as you know what's in between every single one of these pipe systems, you can do whatever you want. Lots of different types of messages. I won't go through them all. I put this on here because I thought you might take the slides and so you can kind of get a sense if you ever need to look at what's available. There are more. These are just the most common ones. So hospital appointments, when someone's come into an outpatient appointment, whether someone's been admitted to the hospital, whether they've been moved to another ward, whether they've been discharged, all these stuff becomes quite important in writing software if that's the thing that you need to do. Having people click and forget to click more importantly, which breaks all your processes, is a really good thing. So for this, again, standardization. I don't deal with any of that mess on the previous page. There's a product called Mirth, which is a integration engine. It's open source. It's great. We just drop it into a VM or a container, whatever the hospital wants us to run it on. It deals with all that horridness on the other side and transforms it into a web service call. So our system just accepts a web call, service call with updated demographics, sends us the information in a nice little JSON blob, and we manage it. Or it sends us a result, or it sends us anything. So this has a massive capability. Our hospital, actually, since we started using it for our researchy type stuff in our applications, our core IT department had a product that was really difficult to use, really difficult to manage, costing them £500,000 a year. They then moved to this open source product. Actually, they do pay for the support contracts. I think it's got like 10K a year or something support from the company, but it's way, way cheaper. And so we actually got them to go the other direction, to start using some open source software rather than paying through the nose for a solution, which was quite satisfying. But there's things to help you out. You just have to know what to look for. And we use this for all HL7, and I think we use it for a couple of imaging requests, but we don't usually use it for imaging because we have other ways of dealing with that. So there's imaging next. If your application needs images, do it properly. Integrate with your PACS system. Don't ask people to get CDs from the radiology department because they'll hate you and they'll stop doing it as soon as they can. It's not hard. It's not hard to query PACS system for DICOM. Every language has a half-decent library for making DICOM queries now. The hard bit is getting the images, which means you need a DICOM server. But again, all those awesome open source people help us out. We have chosen one. Yeah, so if you do this, then your PACS team, who does manage your PACS, just adds it as a node. This is a job they do every other day for lots of workstations. You're not special. You're not some research project. You just put in a request, say, new DICOM node, please, and they'll do it. You almost won't ask you why. They do it so frequently. We use a system called Orthanc for this. A very small, lightweight DICOM server that sits there and just works. The advantage of this one, the reason we went for this one, is it will take DICOM images and do the whole DICOM thing, but actually you can query it over REST as well. So we never deal with DICOM. We'll ask the PAS system to send it. That's the level of our request in a DICOM thing, which is 1 or 2 lines, which we understand. Once they appear on Orthanc, it's all web services after that. We can pull the images via web services if we want to do some processing and get them into the application on the local file system. So this satisfied all of our needs. As you can see, we try and standardize on web services for everything, so we just have to learn one technology. And we try and abstract ourselves away from the ghastliness of the hospital as quickly as possible, either through integration engine or through this Orthanc DICOM web server. And so that makes our lives much easier. The IT people just think it's a normal thing. And it didn't take long to invest in that. And that's probably our stack of tools that we build on. I think this is the most important statement. Now, this is not, particularly profound. I mean, you're all researchers, so maybe you don't go for the easiest job. Maybe you go for the most interesting job. I can tell you that everyone else in the world will do the easiest job first, especially in your IT department. Your job is to make your job the easiest job for them to do. And that means you need to understand their job. You need to understand their challenges to some degree. You need to understand how difficult it is for them to do something. Even though it seems simple to you to ask for something, if that's like a day of them having to reconfigure a firewall because you didn't bother learning how to use an authenticated proxy server to get out of the hospital properly, they're not going to do it. They just don't. And they won't do it for me. It's not like I'm special. I've just learned to work around them, which is why I'm effective. They have the same response when we go to them with these things. So that's your task, really. And that's the biggest task. Everything else is easy. Doctors, consultants, nurses, users, they come with their challenges, but you have to get past this one. You can't go around this one, and you need to learn really what they need from you to help them do your job. Sorry, how are we doing for time? No, quite really. Understanding your consumers. You could write a book on getting users to do what you want and still fail most of the time. But some general statements that we've learned over the years, what people want is almost never what they need. Seems to be true everywhere I go.
Only a problem if they're insistent, which they often are.
Yeah, but we don't listen to them.
You have to pretend to listen to it.
No, you do.
Fine
You do have to pretend to listen to them. But the ultimate stop, and I've only used this once, with one consultant who was absolutely adamant. I said, when you're in clinic with a patient and they've been on Google and they think they know what's wrong with them and how to treat it, and you just want them to shut up and do what you say because that's what's going to get them better, you're my patient. And he didn't particularly like it, but he stopped. I said, I'm happy to explain anything you want, but I know more about this than you, because this is my job. So if you want to understand what I'm talking about, I'll do it, but don't just say you want this, because it's not going to work. You can.
It's harder when they're the ones paying you.
Well, sure. I mean, the other thing that I do say is, if I'm in that situation, I'll just say, fine.
I was actually going to ask you one of my key questions for this. Maybe I can ask it now. How do you deal with sort of social pushback from, and I don't mean from patients, from the medical community, when you deploy in the system, when you update something, when you change something? Obviously, people they're busy people. They're not going to want to learn the new ways of doing things. They're going to come to you and complain. What's the best way to get them to shut up?
Make it better than what they've got.
But with any IT system, there's this sort of curve where initially you have to, the productivity decreases before it goes up again.
Well, it depends what you're doing. No, you can. That's true. If you do something big, it's a big thing, then of course you're only going to satisfy 80% of everybody's requirements, because that's all you can ever do. We almost never do that. We build small systems. They might share a common platform, so it's quite quick, but almost everyone we work with thinks they're getting a tailored solution for them.
Right.
And it's not harder. In fact, it's easier to maintain and manage, because we just have like 50 simple things. It's easier to maintain and manage than one massive thing. Because if you've got one massive thing, you change one thing, and there's all the impacts of testing before it goes out the door. You've got like a 600-page test script for a massive application instead of like 2 pages that say, yeah, just go through this routine. That's all it. We build applications go the other way. So we've got a radiology management system, which is all the imaging done for the radiology department. The porters needed to get a list of who needed collecting off the wards, which is in the RIS system. That was like 4 pages deep in this RIS product. Given that staff group, because they're not particularly interested in computers, most of them don't even have a login. They absolutely did not want any of that. We gave them an application that just had one button on it. It was a web page, and they pressed that button, and it printed out the current list of patients. The productivity of that team increased massively because they were all working. Someone would just come in, press the thing, list, next one. We're trying to do Uber for porters now, which is kind of really quite interesting. So we track them around the hospital, and then we put calls out, and whoever's nearest just takes the next job rather than having to return to base, which is what they do now to find out where the next job is, to find out that it's like 10 meters from where they started off 10 minutes ago. So we're looking at what that might look like and how we can track it. We need a load of stuff doing tracking people over Wi-Fi and devices and things like that. But you can make people's lives much easier with simple things rather than massive things. So we tend not to do big things. And as such, we don't have that problem most of the time. I have had that problem with one product where they didn't want to use it. The consultant hated it, but the nurses made them do it. So, because the nurses run the hospital.
Do they now?
Yeah.
I guess things are different in the UK.
No, I don't think
Here
they
it's
are.
pure feudalism.
They pretend that that's the
the
case. And when they're in a room with the other, that's exactly what you'll get. The consultant's nurse tells him he has to do something, he will almost certainly do it, because he can't risk annoying the nurses in his clinic because they run his life. It's like her life, whatever. That is how it works quite often when you get down to it.
And also to see the consultant, you need to go
Yeah,
through
sure.
all the steps. So first you don't see the consultant for a while.
Yeah.
You see the consultant.
I mean, yeah, the nurses are the firewall, right, between the consultant and the outside world. That's obvious.
Sure, but if they need something to happen,
I guess they're in the same situation in that they have to listen and nod their heads and then do
Yeah,
their thing
sure.
anyway.
but they're a much more open group than consultants.
Interesting. I thought that, with those foundational infrastructure that you mentioned at the beginning of the talk, you do need to upgrade that as well, right? And that comes with some changes in the way it's used and information it provides to the upper layers, and perhaps these are the big systems that you
Yeah, sometimes, not often.
figure out.
We do upgrade them quite frequently, but getting a document out of alfresco hasn't changed in 15 years. Not the API for doing it. I mean, I'm sure it's all changed inside. I don't concern myself with it. And the front end, if you use it natively, it's changed a lot over the years. But the API has been pretty. We don't do anything particularly exotic with it. We just say, put a document in, get a document out. Those have been on the list since day one of requirements, and they haven't bothered changing them. I'm not saying it never happens, but it's unusual for it to happen to them.
The issue that we're dealing with here with many of our products, we're obviously light years ahead of us in terms of having this whole process figured out, well practiced and working, but trying to push some solutions into a clinical setting. And yeah, there is some usually pushback from the IT guys, but that is to be expected for the reasons you just outlined. But you also run into pushback from the medical community. Oh, it's a new thing. Maybe it will make my job easier, but I don't have time to learn it. I have to see patients. It's like this. What have you done for me today? Approach.
Yeah, no, sure, and that happens. The worst project I ever did was a corporate one. So usually I work directly with departments. We did the workflow project, which went into every single outpatient department in the hospital. And the organisation sponsored that. We did it in 3 departments and it worked really well. And they said, right, we want this everywhere.
They being the management.
Yes, the board of the hospital said, we want this everywhere. And that was like the worst thing that ever happened to us. Because before then, we are kind of going in and saving people from the mess they find themselves in, right? And that's easy because they want help. Those 3 departments wanted us there. Now you're going into departments where there's exactly that. And we just kind of walked away initially. Is
there a happy end to the story?
Well, yeah, they all got told they had to use it, and eventually they did.
Given enough time, people will usually come around.
Yeah, sure. And I'm not in a
initial-
rush. I'm not in a rush. I mean, it's different when you're doing fixed term pieces of work and you have to get deliverables and all that stuff. In the hospital, don't mind. They're a bit slow on the take up. It's okay.
They're flooded with new IT solutions in particular. So
Yeah,
every month there's something new. Usually you end up in a situation where you have the consultant asking the nurse to explain to them how to use this or that device, because they are no longer able to
Yes.
stay abreast.
And when we do that, and we do still have that. And in workflow, that example, we have 3 departments now still where the consultants will not click the buttons on the system. So the nurses outside click the buttons for them to move the patients through the process. It's so important to them that the patient journey is managed effectively, that they take on that role, which is terrible. But I mean, if they're willing to put up with it, it's up to them for the benefits that they get out of the rest of the system. It's difficult, but it hasn't happened to me that often, I have to say.
Right.
Yeah.
At this scale, I figured that would be one of the main obstacles when talking about delivering something new in terms of functionality.
Sure, I agree. Well,
So go on, I don't want to hijack the meeting.
yes. So a piece of software is never a piece of software. It's part of the process. You need to understand that. You really do. You need to go and see them. And in doing that, you will almost always be able to add value to whatever it is you're doing. If you think you're doing an image processing application, that's fine. But then you'll find out quite soon that they've got other problems that you can actually just really super easy build onto the edge of whatever it is you're doing to help manage the whole process that they have to go through rather than just this one thing, if you understand it. And we always do that. So for the workflow thing, for like a month, I just went and sat down in the waiting chairs in several outpatient departments for 2 hours and just watched the chaos, watched the patient, listened to the patients complaining about how they'd been forgotten, watched the staff on the desk and what they were running about doing. And then you kind of really get a sense of what their problems are, because it's not what they think it is, or they don't see the source of their problems in the same way that kind of an engineer or a scientist is going to say, why are you doing that? That's the thing that's killing you. Once that happens, everything falls apart. If you see the mess and can't see through it, if you look at an observer, you can often see there's some fundamental problems that are not so difficult to solve once someone points them out. Let people talk about their role. Let people talk. It's quite important, because you're quite scary to them. I mean, some more than others, obviously, looking on the run, but people don't really understand computers.
Is that still the
Yes.
the mindset? I
Oh,
thought
I
that
mean,
was sort of evaporated away over the years.
People don't understand computers. They don't. Anyone who can make a computer do something is still magic.
It's a hospital. Everyone's qualified and educated.
In what?
Even so.
I mean, of course, it's going to get better all the time. But, you know, what's the consultant age? 50, 60?
Actually, I'm convinced it's getting worse over time. Do we understand computers?
Wait
Still,
for quantum.
I don't think about that. Tiny little bit.
They just don't get them. You know,
I'm intimidated by the hardware guys.
Common people would probably believe that, well, I don't know, everything connected to this computer deep down is magic, as you say. So maybe they are more familiar with
Yeah,
as a user than 20 years ago, but still, and they believe that this magic, and also that IT guys knows everything in the department of the computer. So like people were asking me, okay, you are from IT, so you will know how to fix my, I don't know, mobile phone.
Yeah,
Sure. You have to act the part.
I do. You know, of all the extraordinary things that we do, some of them are like,
Like
from an
Tesla
engineering
cars,
perspective, quite impressive. You know, the biggest thanks that I get, because people genuinely don't understand what I do, is when I teach them how to use Control-C and Control-V.
Oh,
Like seriously, that's what people thank me for the most. You see their faces and I've changed their lives. And I think, well, I did this other thing that was like,
say that
that's it.
some people were just selecting from the menu because they didn't know about shortcuts, and they were just
Some just
copy,
type it, not even
retype,
copying and left clicking. Just type
That's
that.
hardcore.
Yeah, sure. But there's, I mean, we have a staff group who are very much oriented towards people. Generally, you're on a spectrum. You're either interested in people and you're empathetic and you care about them, or you're interested in things and engineering and science. And there's people that span it. But in general, when you're in a hospital, most people don't particularly like technology. They'd much rather talk to a person. That's why they got into it. They didn't get into healing people to have to mess about with computers all day. They don't enjoy it. They don't have any interest in it. So yeah, you're quite scary to them. You have to let them feel like they're in control. And people like to talk about what they do a lot. So we start off these conversations really quite openly. What's your problem? And you do sit and you think, I'm not really interested in this, but you have to go through the process. Puts them at ease, gives them some control. You always come back around at the end. You know, you listen to their story. You take off 80% of the stuff while they're kind of meandering around their life in the department. And then you go back to the start and say, all right, well, you didn't tell me about this bit. What happened here? What happened here? Well, it is very much a process. You go down and say, right, I need a list of what this thing has to do. You do. You won't get it because they don't know what it has to do. Oh, I'm missing a slide. Oh, I'm not missing a slide. Sorry. So these are just, I mean, it's just a collection of statements about users, in particular users in a hospital. There's no profound things there, just some things to think about if you do have to go out and meet some real people. Treat them with some care because they've usually got problems and you can help them. And they will absolutely love you at the end of it if you manage it. But they're scared often of getting into this process because it'll take time, because it'll be hard, because they don't understand what they're getting into a lot of the time. And you need to guide them through that process. And never be wrong. good one as well. Never promise anything you can't deliver, and never tell them something that's not true. You don't have to tell them anything. We're very conservative in our discussions in the early phases, at least, with what we can do, what we might be able to do. They don't understand IT language. It's a common thing, and the salespeople take them to the cleaners with this. So you're in conversation with companies that, yeah, we could do something like that. That doesn't mean anything. At best, that means it's going to cost you a fortune. At worst, it means that we just can't do it. But they walk away from a statement like that thinking, oh, they said they're going to do this.
That's not what the contract says.
Well, sure. But we're the same. We have to manage their expectations. We have to be careful with what we promise. There's a phrase that I quite like, which is reputation walks into town but leaves on horseback. And it's kind of a variation on you're only as good as your last mistake. But I kind of prefer that because you do have to work to get people to trust you. And you can lose it fairly quickly if you let them down. Not instantly. You get a few mistakes, but you can't do it too much. So be conservative and over-deliver. Of course, everyone loves that. So for the last bit, I'm just going to talk to you a bit about some of the research that we do. We are the trust leads for the research infrastructure for the hospital. So we have, at the last count, if we just take databases, because we don't know what's in most of them, 2,000 across the hospital. That does not include the Excel spreadsheet, which many people use as databases to manage patients, which is terrifying.
It's a step up from handwritten notes.
But only jokes.
A Word document.
At least that's good. But yeah, we have a lot of the problems. I'm sure you're the same. We've got EPRs, but they don't cover everywhere. And lots of departments have their own little bits and pieces. We're on a journey to try and sort it out, but still we don't. So to make anything useful in the hospital, we have to have a research data warehouse to do research. It's expanding all the time. It's updated nightly or weekly, depending on the system feeds. It's based on Apache Drill and Elasticsearch. So this is quite a big thing that we've built up over quite a period of time, adding systems to it as we go. This is not quite, because it's gone off the bottom, a list of the systems that come in. I don't expect you to read it, but we've got the PAS, which is called Lorenzo, which is all the appointing, theatre systems, labs come in, clinical coding comes in, all of the appointing, things that get captured at bedside, early warning scores, things like that. So we are now running at number of patients, 2,181,000. 500,000 people in Sheffield, roughly, but because we're a centre for the entire country for some specialties, the number of people who are kind of on our books have hit one of our services is much, much bigger. Total facts in the warehouse, 860 million. That's a bit of an odd number because a fact can be anywhere from a blood result, or hematocrit, which is just a single number, a single kind of raw database, it's actually a record in Elasticsearch, but it can be a single number, or it can be an entire Word document that was sent to a patient or a GP or someone that referred them in. So these facts are massively varied in terms of what they contain. And probably, almost certainly for you, most of the consolidated knowledge that we have about our patients is still in free text, largely Word documents, or radiology reports, which are just text boxes. These are a nightmare to deal with. We've spent a long time looking at NLP technologies to try and get some value out of these things. This is kind of stuff that we do now. So routinely, we have a stack, which is from Stanford, that runs on top of that warehouse with some odd millions of records in. And that works okay. Now, obviously, large language models are the thing. And we have some very specific problems that the Stanford stuff does not deal with and will never deal with, we don't think, given how it works. So we're starting to look at what large language models might do for us in terms of extracting information from those. We've got to have a pipeline, we've got to harvest it, we've got to store it somewhere in a piece of infrastructure. So we have things like this, and this is just a couple of the problems. So the top ones are easy, no, whatever it is, can't even pronounce that word, such as acoustic neuroma, hence I've reassured him. So red is a negative statement about this clinical concept, which means they don't have acoustic neuroma.
Are those data workflows, as in text extraction here, yeah?
Yes.
Time sensitive, as in you need to do them by tomorrow or as soon as the result is being uploaded, because you might need it for further processing of the patient, or is it more for future reference, yeah, for research?
For this, it's, well, I mean, we're going through the process now where we're being asked to do some things in real time. Up till now, no, everything gets updated nightly. That's the most frequent feed we have, is every night. And that nightly NLP stack will run over any new facts that come into the thing. So the next day we have it. Now we're starting to get requests for things in the afternoon that were done in the morning, and we're looking at what the infrastructure needs to do to cope with that. And that's not easy because of our infrastructure. So we're asking ourselves, do we actually need to change the infrastructure? Do we need to refresh that warehouse technology away from where it is now to be able to deal with more real-time feeds? We've only had one request for that yet. I'm still kind of on the fence, looking for whether we're probably going to have other people come to us with similar requests, in which case it might be worth doing a big project. But no, for now, it's all offline, nightly, ready for the next day, which is fine for most research queries, which is what it was built for. So the examples didn't show acoustic neuron, all these things are all fine. We get this, which is a real problem. I have not attempted this for an acoustic neuron tumor. This is describing a treatment plan that the doctor's never done for. Clearly, they have an acoustic neuron, or he wouldn't be saying that. But this is a negative, clearly negative statement about acoustic neurons. So that the NLP says, well, that's not. They don't have acoustic neuron. Now, we will have had positive statements against that in other sources, so we kind of balance them out. And we also do some of this kind of sentiment analysis is the best way to describe it. I don't think it's formally sentiment analysis how most people would do it, but we've got speculative statements about things which means it might be, but it might not be. But the problem we have is that the language clinicians use, especially to each other, is anything but natural. And so these natural language processing tools are not fit for any purpose that we have, really. They have the potential to be, but we're at the very least going to have to retrain them. We have radiology consultants use a phrase which is not inconsistent with. Which kind of sounds like it means something, but when you think about it for a while, it means nothing. It means it's definitely not this. It's not a statement about anything. But they use it all the time. I don't know why they use it. I assume the referring clinicians who ask for the imaging can get some kind of sense of maybe we're on the right track. I don't know, when you break it down, it's a terrible statement to use, but they like it. And NLP models, even large language models, are going to struggle with things like that unless they've really been tuned to deal with them. So now we're looking at what the infrastructure needs to look like for a large language model. We're looking at Llama too, I think. But more importantly, what the retraining is going to have to look like, because that's more of a challenge.
Attention model is what you guys need to zoom onto, because large language models will be trained with any garbage.
Yeah, sure.
And it will give you back any garbage. But this, to me, or the not inconsistent with, or these are kind of attention statements that need to be handled with care. So things like that, anomalies will probably have to be standing out as being trained as an attention model.
Yeah. And we've just put in a proposal for a PhD student to start looking at some of this, and we're trying to get funding to do it on a larger scale. But yeah, it's hard. It's a difficult problem to crack. But this is our biggest challenge right now. We've got infrastructure, we've got platforms and stuff like that, but these languages are still the workhorse of a lot of the things that we have to do in terms of research and patient identifiers.
So just one question. So this is something new that you are doing, yeah?
We've been doing these NLP things with the standard stack for about 5 years now.
My question is that language evolves, and then new doctors come, new generation comes, and then use different phrases, which may kind of mean the same. So using different versions of language models, to different
I mean, the model we use now is very mechanistic. We understand it. It's kind of fine, and it will deal with some of those types of challenges. But what we do with large language models, I don't know. We're just starting to look at it now and find out what it means. It has the potential, like everything everyone says, to do some really useful things, but I don't know how it's going to work for us yet, or if it's going to work for us yet. Imaging, we have very good imaging infrastructure. It's probably the first stuff that we start building. anonymization pipeline. So we're routinely, well, once a month we'll get a request for 15,000 imaging studies, was the one I got yesterday, MR studies. So we use the warehouse to identify imaging studies for patients with properties X, Y, and Z. Route all the stuff out of packs through our Orphanc server, bit of C# stuff in a Docker container that anonymizes it, and then we push it to XNAT, is our kind of chosen research packs system. It's got some nice properties. It's a kind of a pack system, but it segregates things by projects and controls access by projects. So we just route it into a little pot, and the researchers themselves pick up the images. They can take them wherever they want, or they can pay someone to process them inside the server. But usually they take them away. They just download them, take them off somewhere. But for us, we have a pipeline. Users can do it through a web page manually if they've only got a few to do, or we can do a bulk process where we push them all through to the end. And that works really well, actually. We're starting to do some really quite cool AI type stuff on imaging on the university next to the hospital, because it's so easy for us to route all this stuff through. And the PACS team don't even know what's happening. We don't even ask them for this. We just do a DICOM query, get the study instance UID, say send, and we throttle it back. I think we send, it takes weeks to do a few thousand images because we're nice to the PACS system, and we do like 3 studies a minute, I think is the rule that we put on it, so they don't even notice we're bothering them.
Do you verse?
No, well, do we? No, because PACS data doesn't, the PACS is the source for the data, and the images never get updated. It'll be a new study if it got added. And we don't kind of have triggers for, usually we just do it in bulk mode, so they say from this point backwards, they want to top it up to send them a job.
What kind of anonymization engine do you use? Is it an automated process? Does it involve any interaction?
No, I wrote it.
It's a sort of a custom solution.
Yeah, it's just a chunk of C# code that follows the standards, and then some other bits and pieces that we didn't like being left in there after the standards.
And it only looks at the metadata, right? Not at the image itself.
Yes.
Okay. What if there are some identifying features in the image?
Well, we block some types of imaging, so we don't send ultrasound, because that has usually got information turned into pixels. Secondary captures are a special type thing which have annotations on, so we block all of that. We only send through the raw CT, MR, or plain film. And certainly for our scanners, there's never any embedded pixel level annotations on it, at least. You know, if you want to say, well, you've sent through an MR scan of someone's head, you can put the face back on it, and then we can ask the face to find them through facial recognition. We do not concern ourselves at that level about anonymization, because they haven't been asked.
Is this that's the kind of splitting curves you run into, figuring whether we are GDPR compliant?
Well, it says with reasonable efforts.
Yeah, it does, but
And arguably,
that
Facebook.
doesn't mean anything, right?
No, it doesn't, but you can argue, but that means you can argue
It's up to
anything.
the courts to decide that. You don't want to end up in the court anyway.
I've got better things to do with that time than some of the
It is a concern. You end up erring on the side of caution, and that cuts you off from a lot of useful research you could otherwise do.
Yeah, we don't do any of that pixel level stuff. We have stuff that we know is compromised or potentially compromised, and we just block it all. But MR, CTs, and plain films, all stuff just goes through with the metadata. Removed.
That's a more sensible.
Right, said all that. So we are starting to do a lot of AI development projects internally in hospital, but also with external partners, mostly in the UK at the moment. But we do have the ability to send these collections places. And this is our last thing, Aperture. This is probably the best thing that's happened to us in a long time. We've built a new clinical portal. So we integrate sometimes from the warehouse that we built for research, which can now have clinical applications because everybody wants the data in it. And it's just a clinical portal. You type in the search bar and you have a tab per system, and it just lets you get into it. We've got 2,000 users. But more importantly, it gives us the ability to put on the desktop of any PC in front of any clinician outputs of something. So if we've done some algorithm and processing, we can then get that back into the clinical workspace for them without a new application that's been deployed. We can just add in a little tab. So this is kind of what it looks like. Each one of these things is a separate clinical system. in the hospital, even down to imaging. So the AGFA is the image pack system. So you click that and you get the whole pack system appear in this window. You only have to search one, but we can now add in as many tabs as we want here. So if there was a tab here for, AI summary of the record based on NLP or large language models, whatever we get to, we can actually just drop that in super easily now. And this is everywhere in the hospital. So this was a big thing for us to achieve. We saved the hospital £2 million in the process, because that's what they were paying for a previous product that wasn't anywhere near as good.
So you don't only do the small stuff.
No, we don't. We've got 3 big things.
Okay, it's one of them.
And this is one of them. The workflow outpatient thing, this is one of them now. Only just done live 3 months ago. Very well received. People are finding bugs in it all the time, which is the way, but we're fixing them quickly, and everyone seems super happy. Better than the thing they had before, cheaper than the thing they had before, but gives us the capability to do a whole load more stuff in the clinical workspace than we ever had in the past. So it's quite a big development for us. But it was only because we had the research warehouse and we had all the data to pin it off. So people would never have done it for 1 or 2 little systems that they never had access to. But Ormus is the theatre's reports. They could never see those. They never left the department. They come to us though, and now we send them on. So there's a whole load of stuff in they never had. And that's why they're really engaged and keen to use it, because there's a totally obvious benefit for them. And something they could never do before. It's not just easy, now possible, where it wasn't. And I think that's me. And that's probably about an hour since we started putting these on.
It's kind of humbling to learn all the amount of work that needs to be put into actually used and liked by the medical community.
Yeah, sure, but now we've got the foundations in place. It doesn't take us long to do stuff. You just had to put in a bit of work up front. And I can credit you guys with doing some of that work. So all of our security is based on stuff you did. You saved me a year's work.
That's like that.
I would have to spend a year evaluating 10 different web-based security or nightmare stuff that ultimately I would have turned away from because it's too complicated or too fragile.
Always.
Nightmare.
So I just didn't have to do any of that work. I did worked in a research domain with some people who are really good at what they do, and you take that thing and bring it back and use it. So if you can have relationships like that, you don't have to do everything yourself.
First of all, thank you, Stephen, for the presentation. I have 2 questions. I'll make one remark. One question is, so it's been ages since I configured Nginx upstream pass last time, but I wonder, so you have this functionality that you use for integrating, I guess, all those tabs, which are probably served as web applications or something like that. So there is an Nginx serving all these, and you have this JWT token as, I guess, inside the header, right? Right to the Nginx, which then reads it. I wonder how you made your upstream applications, that Nginx, that then
We didn't.
Okay.
So in the warehouse, in the clinical portal, half the tabs are written by me in terms of the services are called into the data warehouse. So we use JWTs to secure those data requests, but they're rendered by me in a Windows form component. The downstream systems that are web-based all have their own Windows integration. So you get to that ICE one, the first one that you saw there. It knows who you are because of the Windows identity. So it doesn't use that. So any things that we can't integrate with, don't already have SSO built onto them, we will create our own set of services to get the data out of the back end, if you like, and we will present it using JWTs as that.
So second question is, I wonder if for tracking the deliveries and so on that you mentioned your application about people running around the hospital delivering things.
Oh, the portal
where
there.
you, where you, yeah, where you try, have you tried the beacons? The beacons technology. Beacons are small devices that you stick to something and they communicate with Bluetooth. I think low energy Bluetooth or.
We'd be doing it by device, phone, and using the mobile network tracking infrastructure and location services, because we've got a Cisco Wi-Fi network. And this is where we're up to at the moment, actually trying to assess whether tools that come from Cisco for Wi-Fi tracking, it will be the mobile device that we were tracking, not the bed, which is the people we care about.
Okay.
It's the porters are the guys who go and get people from the wards and then
Right.
roll the bed down to radiology to have some imaging done somewhere else for another test, and then take them back to the wards. So we spend a lot of time waiting for lifts, going down corridors, and but it would be a mobile phone based thing.
Okay.
For devices, we've been looking at passive RFID trackers because we keep losing defibrillators. I don't know how. They're not particularly small, but don't find them ever. And when you need one, it's usually pretty urgent. So, so we do have problems with device tracking rather than people tracking, and they're trying to do something with that. But it's hard actually, a lot harder than it seems, especially in a big. One of our hospitals is a sort of story tower block with loads of concrete and steel. And they just tend not to work. They get black spots all over the place, and we're trying to decide what we can live with and what we can't live with in terms of coverage. There's a basement where nothing gets in, apparently. They've got the Wi-Fi, but the Wi-Fi is patchy around the corners. It's really hard problem to solve, device tracking.
My name is Ahmed, and I am the clinical data science team leader. My team is, the four of them are sitting here. And there's plus one more person upstairs. And I have actually a solution for the problem of real-time updating. In fact, we are using large language models. We're also doing the fine-tuning, which is essentially we are doing the retraining ourselves.
Yep.
And we're selecting what models that go in, and we've been testing, and we've been very successful. Actually, we tested on very small models here. We got accuracy of 98%, 99%, and also we designed a foundational clinical decision support system specified in prostate cancer that understand medical text. So as complex as it is with the medical text, we can do it with other text. This could be a really nice solution for you if you have any interest in it. Please feel free to speak with me tomorrow.
I will speak with you tomorrow. Yeah.
Yeah, we have a meeting scheduled for 11:30.
Okay.
Cool.
Hi, I'm Kasia. I wanted to say a big thank you for the presentation. It was really. I wanted to ask you, when did you start forming the team, and when was the first project? For how many years?
A long time ago. So it will be 30 years ago.
Right.
It started with 2 people who could use Microsoft Access. And I'll tell you what, only 2 years ago did I get rid of the last of those Microsoft Access images.
Okay, because I can see that you are now at the level of that you've got the standards of work and the process map out, right? So I'm wondering, are you a part of any national initiative to share that knowledge, or to expose other external parties to what you accomplished?
Not really.
No. Okay.
We did our share, by the way.
Well, we need
invaluable knowledge.
before we do anything, we would need to have a formally certified quality system for software development, which we do not have. As soon as we get that, then maybe we can start going outside and discussing it with people. It would have been really difficult. We tried a couple of years ago and we couldn't get anything. Now we've got GitLab internally, which we can manage properly. And we've kind of augmented GitLab with some extra bits and pieces around the edge to kind of help with that quality process. We're in a position where I think we can do it. I think we can and put together all the documentation, be compliant with the medical devices directive, which is the nightmare thing. I mean, most of the stuff we do isn't a medical device, but one or two bits and pieces are, and that's a really big burden for anyone to undertake.
And the use of data is kind of mixture, the end, research and knowledge that comes from using the data would be for the benefit of patients, but also for running the hospital,
Sure.
right? Yeah. Do you see any other potential that, along the way, apart from those two applications, maybe something?
Well, I don't know, those are the only two that we focus on, really. I mean, because we support research, we do data extracts all the time for health economics and things like that. So we do contribute sort of at national level projects.
Right.
But I don't do that research. I just the data on case reviews.
Yeah, I see.
Churns it across. But because we've spent time making that easy, things do move on faster than they would have 10 years ago, certainly.
And how would you, that would be the last question, I don't want to hijack all the discussion, but lots of people are saying that, with the processes that automate lots of things that are being done, you sort of put a cover on real problems rather than solving the problems. You're dealing with a system that is in place and then put some scaffolding on it and make it more efficient. That was the biggest issue with robotic process automation and lots of stuff like this. What would you say to that? Do you see it this way? Or?
Yes, sure. I mean, because of our process, because we hire people who are interested in the problems, which means actually our team is predominantly engineers and physicists, not computer scientists. We've got one computer scientist, but because you have to try and understand the real underlying problem, and scientists tend to want to do that before you start coding. We find that lots of our problems don't exist. Our benefit to the organisation is not just developing software. Lots of the times we get pulled in. I'm on, just recently we've had a problem where someone said that this part's not working. Can you go and look at it? Not can you develop a piece of software, can you go and figure out why they can't get through their patient list when everyone else can? So
how is that your job?
Well, our job is to, but that's the point.
I guess they assume it's a data processing issue.
No, they don't. They don't assume that at all. They know it's probably not. But they know that we have experience in unpicking people's lives, figuring out what their real problems are. And that's really valuable to the organisation as well. And it just so happens that most of the time there's a computer program in it, because most of the time that's what's going to make you more efficient. But a computer program is only going to make you better at what you do. It's not going to make what you do better. There's a massive difference in those two things. You just get faster and slicker. If you do something terrible, you're just going to do more terribly with a computer. And so if you kind of realize that, then sometimes the answer is not a computer. Sometimes the answer is have to just change. So what the most interesting thing there? Western Park reception, cancer hospital, Western Park. People queuing outside, out the door, this is like 20 meters to the door, and out the door and stood in the rain. Can't figure out why they can't get people through reception. Sat there for 10 minutes. Turned out that the receptionist was, because these are frequent people, because on the cancer service you come back every 2 weeks for care, chemotherapy, radiotherapy, they get to know them. And they were just chatting to them, they were selling newspapers. The receptionist selling newspapers to patients. And we were like, well, we've got to stop doing that. And the answer was, yeah, but they like it. I said, well, the person in front of you might like it, but the other 30 who are stood queuing out the door don't like it. And they only it's like they have these blinkers on.
I think the defensive and hostile because it intruded upon their little...
No, and they genuinely started saying, but this is a patient-centered service. We care about what they need. We listen to them. We do all this stuff. And we're saying, yeah, I know, but can't do that for just one person, sacrifice everyone else. And their answer was, oh, well, they'll get their turn when they get to the front. No. I didn't win that fight, by the way.
Dealing with the Polish healthcare system for years. I'm going to surprise us.
I didn't win that battle. usually when you point something out, most people will kind of see it and say, oh yeah, maybe begrudgingly. That's usually how my conversations like that end. This one didn't end like that. I just had to send it up and I said, look, they're doing this, they don't think it needs to change. Someone else is going to have to sort it out because it's a people problem.
It's still a blessing that someone out there recognized that this is a problem, perhaps we should do something about it.
Yeah, sure.
So they said, okay, whether you
But that's
or not, it's
the things that we learn.
everything.
You know, it's not just about computing bits of it, it's about processes. And we do a lot of that as well, because we have to.
Sometimes it's about priorities. So together with my wife, we had this stark comparison of private medical care with our two first kids, and public medical care with our third kid, which we consulted public care because by then it was free for us. This particular checkup during the pregnancy, and the biggest difference, the medical side was basically the same. A very qualified person, top-end equipment, the echo machine, and so on and so forth. So this was all beautiful, but the organization was much worse. And it's not because they were stupid people organizing that over the public hospital. It's the difference of priorities. So in private care, when we pay for that, our time is more valuable. So we were scheduled to exact time, and of course there might be some delays, but more or less half an hour later or 15 minutes later we were in. Whether in public care, the doctor's time is the highest priority. So we waited for like 5 hours because everyone was scheduled to the same time.
Same in England.
All
You
that-
get a different story. from
Yeah,
Boston.
all that- It's
No.
important to understand
Not exactly-
it's
exactly
the
that.
difference of principles
Sure.
that was done on purpose in order to avoid even 1% chance that the doctor, the most valuable resource, is going to wait for at least even 1 minute because someone didn't show up.
And we do that. We had exactly that story. So the workflow system that we put in helped alleviate that to some degree. But it's still time. It's a difference between, Ryanair and British Airways. Ryanair, you get herded into a cattle pen, and when they're ready for you, you all just go through straight away. And you stand there, and they don't give a crap about you, of course, because you haven't paid them enough to do that. That's kind of fine if you want the cheap flight, but that's exactly the model. When you go through, what's the most efficient to the business? It's exactly that. Everyone comes in at 8 o'clock in the morning and I see you when I'm ready. That's the most efficient model from the hospital's resource utilization. Somewhere in the middle, there's offering decent care, and we fall the wrong side of that line a lot. But then there's all sorts of other behaviours that we have, that we stopped with workforce. So people, even if they had an 11 o'clock appointment, they seem to think if they turned up at 9 o'clock, they would get seen earlier. And they did. It used to happen. Now, when we put workflow in, they know exactly what time their appointment's all in front of the screen, they know how long they've been waiting, they know when their appointment is, and now they just say, I'm not going to see you. It's not 10 o'clock. I don't care that you've been waiting 50 minutes already. It's your time. I will click and call you through from the waiting room. And so things have got a lot better. So there's people behaviour. Because they're trying to work the nightmare system, it all gets super complicated. But yes, that's not unusual. That's exactly what we see in the UK and some places.
Any other question? You said something about containers. No?
Yeah.
Containers. Why have you decided to deal with them at the final point? Because mostly you use Microsoft, tools, C#, etc.
We don't.
You
Oh,
said-
well, we use C#, but we
Yeah,
do
you
that.
use C#.
we
Okay,
do
but
that
then-
on Linux and Docker.
Yeah, but then all the products in the hospital, my feeling was it's built around Microsoft products, or is it not?
Yeah, they are, but they're
Yeah.
super expensive.
Okay, so how come, where does containerization come into play here?
So every single web service that we produce now to do anything is written on .NET Core and probably runs in Docker. Because Windows server licenses are expensive. IIS on top of that is a very expensive product. You have to pay for it. It's obscene, and it's not that good. So we do everything as cheaply as we possibly can. We keep the bits that we really need, which is Active Directory, authentication. Who is this person? What department are they from? What systems are they allowed to access? So we take that in a JWT and then we throw Microsoft away, run everything on Linux with Docker containers, because that's actually the most convenient way for us to do it.
And you use anything for orchestration of those?
Not particularly. We use GitLab deployment pipelines, so they'll deploy the code and restart the container. We don't have enough that we're looking at Kubernetes.
Okay. So no cloud.
No.
So just bare metal and running.
Well, mostly they're VMs, VMware farms. You're a massive VMware farm. But and we could make everything a VM if we wanted, but that's an obscene waste. So now we have 20 or 30 Docker containers running on a server, and then we'll ask for another one. You need another server, but they're all virtualized in the end.
So just quick comment, maybe one to a bit will be an answer for you. So basically, I assume what you said, that actually I heard that .NET Core sometimes even run better on Linux than on Windows. Maybe it's always not, we are not sure, but it can be done. So and also you can have containers on some form of Windows container. I never used them, but I'm not sure they are compatible. The quick comments, of course, thank you for the talk. Yes, everyone is talking about it well deserved, in my opinion. It's very interesting, and also I like particularly that the part that what we've done in Europe somehow resonates.
Yeah, I really like that.
Yeah, but it's not only because I was involved in this, of course, but also because when we are doing all those projects, EU projects, sometimes people may think whether they would or would not help, and it's really good to see them somehow, at least part of them.
And I always feel bad that the commission will never find out about that. They're always looking for use cases. How did this change, patients' lives? Tons of the stuff that we can, modest sized chunks, not the whole your valve, we're going to simulate your heart thing, but modest chunks of real research got put into services that now make patients' lives better in a hospital. So it takes a couple of years for us to go down that road, and by the time I've put it into real service, no one cares. No one cares about me writing back and saying.
I guess the whole EU funding model, and not just that, basically any funding model for research in IT does the opposite to what you said is a desirable practice. First of all, they're so focused on over-promising and under-delivering.
Sure.
Because you have to put all this fancy language in your proposal to get funded. Secondly, there is this hard focus on a sort of boiled down list of requirements that are sort of given a priori, and then everybody has to live by them for the next couple of years or however long the project takes, instead of going out there, taking a look at how things are done, finding out what you can optimize, what you can help with. That will never get funded, right? Because you have to know going in what you're going to do, right? If we know perhaps that's
when you can get research funding to do the big things, your core infrastructure, you can use their money to explore what's reliable, what's going to work. You can, so we do things. We do things that we didn't really ever think would get translated, but we learned a lot. So what was it? It wasn't alfresco. No, we did get alfresco from the research project as well. It was someone in Philips, maybe was doing something with it, and I saw that and realised it was free and saw that it did everything I needed to do. So that saved me, Googling open source document management systems and getting 50,000 hits. And it's all really important to piggyback off those things. That's why I like doing research. I like going places and meeting people, that's always fun, but actually it's genuinely beneficial if you're doing a job like that.
So that's a quick question. So I think you are not using public cloud at all, yes?
No.
So like you mentioned, of course, on-premises are Active Directory, so that also means that you are not using Azure Active Directory, or what they call Entra ID, or etc.
Not yet.
Not yet.
When the trust moves to,
I was wondering, this for me it will also at some point interesting integration, because of course Microsoft likes making money and likes to keep calling some things similarly, so people are familiar.
Yeah.
So that's why they called well, this IDP, their IDP Azure Active Directory, which is completely have nothing in common with Active Directory. It's not LDAP, it's OAuth, I think, or something like that. So now they rechristened it to Entra ID because probably there was too much confusion, but still, of course, there was some integration between on-premise ID security and data. But okay, so if at some point we may talk about that because, for example, in Sano we are on, let's say, maybe not on the opposite side because we have some on-premise hardware, but it is Linux based for computation. We also cooperate, of course, with Symphony and etc. But for, let's say, this operational part, we have the whole Microsoft ecosystem, like Microsoft 365, which comes with let's say Azure Active Directory or however we would like to call it. And now we are not integrating all our solutions because sometimes it makes no sense. It's better to integrate models in environment with grid because we need to access grid then with our own SSO, but at some point it might be needed to do some cross integration and maybe with some on-premise stuff. So yeah, so we are thinking, would it work to use, I don't know, AWT as some kind of, well,
that's what we do for all our services. That's all we do.
On-premise and cloud.
Yes.
You know that you don't deploy it cloud, but maybe then
I would do it exactly the same.
Yeah.
I don't see any reason to change. And if the trust changes their AD service to something else, we'll have to re-engineer the back end, but what it spits out in the JWT will be exactly the same in all of our applications. And I can be sure that they'll have to do that because so many other things in the hospital need that type of structure that they'll have to preserve.
So one more thing, because what Tomek also asked, so it's about this. You mentioned this module, yes, because it's something also that we were doing some proof of concept. We never actually deployed it in-house, but this Nginx and this module you mentioned for
well, it's not even a separate module. I think it's just a call out that it will make. You just get to say,
okay,
in the Nginx pipeline, call this web service and see if it's okay or not.
Okay, so I think it's something we can also doing in collaboration because there was something like that.
Yeah, you have to do some kind of special things in the sense of.
So there is ready module or built-in actually, yeah, because there was one authentication mechanism that calls, as you say, and there's also a possibility to use a kind of a scripting language called Lua. And use Lua to process those tokens, yes, in Nginx. Okay, so this is around it. Okay.
We just did the simplest thing. Okay, so and as long as you arrange your token properly, so the token instead of having normal roles, the claims are URLs that you're allowed to access. So Nginx just says, here's the token, here's where they're trying to get to, and our code just zips through the token, says is the URL path allowed, and that says okay or not okay.
So application.
It's application specific, yeah. But it's super easy.
Doesn't require modification of the application.
No.
Yes. So it's specific because certainly you need to know the paths, but not exactly.
It has to be a modern application that's kind of mostly REST based for its access. You couldn't do it with anything, but for the ones that we need to do it with, it's working really well.
We have an administrator interface on top of that.
No. Well, we have a UI to create the tokens.
How you manage the access permissions for the users? Decide who can access what?
We have an application that just stores in the database role per system, what role you have, admin or user or whatever, and then usually linked to that is an Active Directory group name because that's how most of our services run. But instead of an Active Directory group name,
and is that sufficient in all cases? You don't need fine grained access and management.
We try not to. I mean, because we write it, we just say don't do it, or it'll be a nightmare, and usually we find a way around it.
And almost create another group.
Yeah.
I'm thinking of GDPR again. In some cases, we're forced to specify on an enumerated basis who gets access to what.
Yeah, but
data set. Then you have to manage it user by user, basically.
Well, the user by user is managed. It's just managed in Active Directory. Someone has to say this user is in this group. But by using that, we piggyback off existing hospital processes. So if you're in the rheumatology department, the first thing that happens when you start work in the hospital, someone will go through and add you to about 5 Active Directory groups. That department already uses for other things to access shared files and access documents on the network. And then we just say, oh, there's a group that already exists. That's probably about right. And we link that to their access into the dashboards for rheumatology. And then every now and again, something's wrong. Someone isn't in the right group or doesn't need to be, and we kind of get Active Directory update. But by piggybacking off their existing processes, which all exist in Active Directory for access to everything else in the hospital, we managed to avoid a load of headaches. And even when someone says, I haven't got access, we just say, call help us. Ask them to add you onto this. It's not even my job to fix it.